Hey, welcome to the Mental Meltdown. Hi, I'm Jessica. People call me Jess. I'm a mental health coach, therapist matchmaker, aka I help people find the right therapist for them. But I also work as a registered behavior technician for children with autism, which is my pride and joy. But I'm also here to teach you a little thing or two about mental health, help you on your journey. Everything that I say, take it and apply it to what's unique to your situation. Not everything is a one size fits all. And I'll be talking mainly about my experiences or with clients that I work with, students that I worked with in the past, and what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, what's worked for me, what hasn't worked for me. I am a big sister of 3. You could consider me your big sis or your older cousin. A lot of the advice I give, I also give to my little brothers, which is what inspires me to do this work. Because I came out of a bad situation, narcissistic mother, not the most stable home life, survivor of childhood abuse, and I was able to leave that situation a few years ago, helping my brother, trying to guide him as best as I can for him to do the same. Welcome to the Mental Meltdown. Again, I'm so excited. It is my first of the series here on YouTube, and I had to grab a C4. It was either this or my leftover Starbucks from yesterday. C4 was where it was at. Not only is it a good flavor, but it actually does wake me up a little bit. Hopefully doesn't give me the jitters because I was jittery this morning, but I think it's because I had to film this today. I was a little nervous. But today we're going to be focusing on the question, how to set boundaries. Boundaries are hard, especially if you were raised in a situation where you were basically told you have no boundaries or bodily autonomy. The reason boundaries are so hard to set is because when you're younger and you try to set boundaries, most of the time you're just told no. Or when you ask why you can't do something, it's just because I say so. There's no concrete answers or validation, anything that you're being told as you're growing up. So you're raised in a scenario where when you try to set boundaries, you're immediately shut down. So now as you're older, you don't know how to set them. You're confused as to how to set them. You don't know what is the boundary. And you're kind of maybe sometimes afraid to set those boundaries because they always come with negative consequences. Let's say as an example, I grew up in a house where I felt very unheard by my mother. It was very dictatorship like in not the best ways, right? So I try to set a boundary and I would get slapped across the face. That's just what it was, right? It depended on her mood, it depended on the scenario. And I'm just here to tell you that isn't normal and that isn't okay. If you're trying to set a boundary in a respectful manner and you end up getting a slap in the face because of it, makes you question a lot of stuff, right? So it really does make you wonder, like, all right, first of all, I guess I can't set a boundary. And now I'm just confused as that, all right, I guess I didn't set a boundary. I guess that was just a demand and I shouldn't be demanding stuff. Those are the kind of the questions that arise for me when I was going through it as a teenager. I very much grew up in a place where I was parentified very early and I had a mother who acted like a teenager. And I found that out at a very young age because I was a teenager and I was like, all the other teen girls are doing the same thing you're doing and responding the same way. And I'm like, I don't think this is normal. So if you're in a place where like your whole creencia, your growing up was confusing, we have a lot of work to do. So we're going to start with a baby step, right? First of all, one of the best things you do is write down what doesn't make you feel good. Jimmy says certain words to me or says certain phrases to me, like I don't like to be called the B word, or I don't like this or that. I don't like when Sam holds my hand, doesn't make me feel comfortable. I don't like when Sam comes into the room without knocking. I don't like when my parents don't respect the rules that I set for my home or for raising my child. Those are valid. Those are super valid. The reason why I hesitated on the rule thing, there's a difference between a boundary and a rule. Okay? And that became very evident with the whole Jonah Hill situation with his ex-girlfriend. He was not setting boundaries as he said he was in those texts. And if you don't know the situation, I go to the Twitter threads, TikTok, whatever, you're going to find it. He was claiming he was setting a boundary. He was setting rules. He didn't want her to surf. He didn't want her to hang out with guy friends. He didn't want her to post certain pictures. Right? She's a surfer. She's going to be wearing bathing suits and bikinis. Those are rules. Those are not boundaries. Yeah, that might make you uncomfortable, but you knew what you were walking into before getting into the relationship. And this is who this person was before you went into the relationship. And now you're setting rules to change that person. If those things bother you, you have to fix you, okay? If he really didn't feel the best about his girlfriend posting pictures of herself in bikinis as a surfer, then he needed to work on himself. That's simply what it is. That comes from within, right? That's an insecurity from within for a certain reason, right? I don't know these two people in real life, okay? But what I could tell you is that if he doesn't like her posting these certain things, that's because he's insecure about something, right? That has to do with him and his personal situation. I don't know her, but let's say she did post these pictures and there's lots of guys commenting hard eyes, but she wasn't responding. She was respecting her relationship, right? That could have been a boundary for herself that she set for her relationship. Obviously, these things are also out of her control. It's not her fault that people are commenting hard eyes. Okay? So what Jonah Hill should have done is worked on that with himself, trust her, learn to figure out where these insecurities are stemming from and why, and what he can do to cope with them and feel better and get to a place where he doesn't feel insecure about her posting pictures like that, or hanging out with guy friends. I'm not a couples therapist, but I've been in a relationship for 6 years, and it all comes down to trust. And if something is wrong, like you're a jealous person or you just don't like your partner hanging out with people, that comes from a you place, not a them place, especially if they haven't done a thing wrong. So I just wanted to talk about that for a little second to give you the difference between a boundary and a rule. His boundary should have been him disactivating his Instagram until he figured out and felt better about his insecurities, because he didn't want to see that. But he shouldn't have set a rule for her not to do something. It's not your fault and it's not my fault, but I need to figure out how to feel better about the situation and not let it affect me as much. Okay? All right. So that is a boundary that you could set. It has to do with you and what you're doing about the situation. Example, and I use this a lot. For someone at home who lives with a parent that is a toxic parent, not a healthy parent, they're always yelling at you. You can try to say, hey, if you're going to yell at me and we can't have a conversation at a low level, then I'm going to have to remove myself from this conversation and walk away, or I can't have this conversation with you right now. Let's be realistic. They're not going to be the happiest person if you say that, and it might come with some rage. But this is why I always say as well, depending on your situation, if you are going to say these things, just make sure you have a safe place to go to afterwards. Lock yourself in your room. I used to lock myself in the bathroom. Or so it doesn't escalate. If they're yelling, just listen and don't say anything. Keep a safe distance away from yourself and then walk away into your safe space when it's safe for you to leave. No one knows what happens behind closed doors is something that is so real. That's why I always say boundaries depend on the situation. Let's try to break it down, right? A healthy boundary is dependent on you and your actions, right? What you can control and what you should do about them, not you putting things on other people and setting rules for other people. It's about you and yourself, so you could feel comfortable and safe. Number two, it depends on your home life. Do you live with those toxic people? Do you not live with those toxic people? To what degree can you communicate that boundary with that person, or can you just keep that boundary to yourself? Because if you verbalize it, it'll put you in a dangerous place. When talking about your boundary, I would talk about it in a place where it's like not a you thing. Like, I'm setting a boundary with Sam. So Sam, I don't like when you make me feel this way. So I'm going to make sure I don't hang out with you because you're obnoxious or annoying. No, it's not that. You're setting a boundary and you want a healthy boundary and you want the relationship to grow and build and to be sustainable. You want to stay friends with this person or a relationship with this person. Then you're going to come from an I perspective, okay? This is what I've learned and this is what has helped. And you might need to take the conversation slow because it's going to take some train of thought, some mental energy, but it's better to take your time than say the wrong thing. Sam, I don't feel very comfortable when these words are said. I would very much appreciate if those words were limited because it makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't feel safe. Makes me like skin crawl a little bit, and I just don't want to be in places when those things are said. I would very much appreciate if you would respect that. And if you can't, that's completely fine. Just let me know and I'll move on from there. If the place comes to where like that person is like, oh, don't be a pansy. Oh, words aren't a big deal. Like, who cares? So those are probably the relationships you don't want to keep because you already told them how you felt. It's not about them. It's about you. And they're not making you feel heard or seen and making you feel small. And that's not fair. It's either going to go that way or it's going to be like, oh, okay, thank you for letting me know. I'm going to be mindful of those things. It's going to go one or two ways. And then you're going to decide whether you want to keep that relationship or friendship in your life. It's a necessary evil. It's an uncomfortable evil, but take it into baby steps and make them small boundaries at first, especially if you're starting off, not for the sake of the other person, but for the sake of your own sanity and your own anxiety or whatever the case may be. Because if setting this certain boundary is going to cause you more anxiety than not, then maybe you should start off smaller. Let's say you don't want to have this conversation with Sam or this person. What can you do? It's not healthy to avoid this conversation. What I'm going to tell you is that you're going to have this conversation eventually, but I want you to be able to practice this in front of a mirror, then record yourself saying it. The sooner you do it, the better. Practice, 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 but don't practice too long. If you see this person multiple times a week, then you have to make sure you're practicing this and you're able to tell them within a week. Because or else you're going to seem like you're ghosting and they're going to be like, what's the point of even having this friendship? It's not the same. It's being weird. It's like, what's going on? What's up? Having healthy boundaries is a very, very hard thing to do, and it's very, very much dependent on your situation and what type of boundary you want to set. I had someone before, they had very much difficulty trying to set a boundary with their sibling would just barge into their room for no reason. They just basically that sibling just wanted to annoy that person. So they tried everything. They tried asking nicely and nothing worked. And it's just not a sustainable way of life. Just getting your space disrespected and invaded. This is an extreme, by the way. This is just a common thing. Like, you want someone to respect your space. It's a common human thing. It's common human decency. And so what I recommended for that person, since they lived together, was to just keep their door locked. And they didn't want to feel like they had to lock their door in their room, because it just feels like I have to lock myself into my room because no one listens. And sometimes it has to get to that point. And I told them, if you set this boundary and you lock the door so your sibling doesn't come in, and they already obnoxiously knock on the door when it's already locked, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Because here we're doing something where you're expecting this behavior to go away. The other person is also testing, how far can this go? How far can I go before they give in? When you're setting a boundary, it has to be realistic. And I'm saying this because I love you. It has to be realistic to what your situation is. Because if you're setting this huge boundary that is not realistic and it cannot be upheld, then they're going to know that they could cross this boundary all the time. And it doesn't matter. So let's say they're knocking on the door. They're knocking for 2 minutes. And then that's where you're opening the door. They're going to know all I have to do next time is knock till 2 minutes, and they're going to not uphold their boundary. And this is where the testing comes in, where it gets worse before it gets better. The more that you break down a boundary, the more that you're able to push it. When it comes to a hard boundary, like I said, number one, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Right? So that person is probably going to be knocking on the door for 10 minutes and then give up. They're going to be like, oh, no, like, wow, like they actually set a hard boundary. They're not going to give in. Okay? Like, it's not going to work. Number two, if you set a boundary that they could break, then they're going to know, oh, I just have to do this, and then boundary's not there. And then next time you set a boundary, they'll be like, oh, I just have to push a little harder and it'll be gone. Make sure your boundaries are realistic, and if you're going to set a hard boundary, make sure it's something that you could uphold. Those are the last two things that I'm going to say when it comes to boundaries, because I don't want this to be overwhelming. If you take anything away from what I said today, I want it to be those last two things. If you did find this helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know, are you going to try to set a boundary this week with someone? You don't have to tell me who. And if you have any other mental health questions for the Mental Meltdown, let me know down below and I'll probably answer it in a video later on. I'm super excited for this new series, and thank you for watching all the way through.